Hey, this is Owen. If you're comfortable, leave your first name and state at the sound of the tiny truck backing up.
Hello, Owen. I'm Ian Vernon Lewis from Kent County, Delaware, not too far from West Virginia. I want to say that I support you and your secularist crusade against religious fundamentalism. And I just want to ask you two questions. Number one, what do you think of the war on drugs? And number two, what do you think of the religious organizations that support the war on drugs? Thank you and good luck.
I appreciate the phone call. Obviously, the war on drugs is an important issue to me personally because, as I've said before, I've dealt with addiction. I was addicted to hard drugs for years, for a couple of years after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. That led me to decide to go to school for substance abuse counseling after finally getting clean. And when we were in substance abuse counseling, we talked about the philosophy behind the war on drugs. Now, what are our goals? What are my goals versus the U.S. government goals? Our shared goal is to stop people from using drugs, if possible, right? Has the war on drugs done that? Has it lowered drug use? The answer is no. So we have to find another way to do this. There must be another, more productive way. When I was in school, we talked about more productive ways to do this. The war on drugs, the idea behind it, is to take out the suppliers so that the demand market has nowhere to turn. In reality, that creates a power vacuum. Somebody is going to move in to fill that spot. We saw this happen with the war in Iraq. When Saddam Hussein was taken out, there was a power vacuum, and it was filled with ISIS. That's how it works. That's how power vacuums work. They are filled with replacement people, always. That is why the war on drugs doesn't work. Instead of trying to remove people from the supply chain, thus creating power vacuums, the goal should be to take the wind out of the sails of the supply. Make it so it's not worth it anymore for anybody to step in and do this. That way, when there is a power vacuum, nobody will be interested in filling it. That is how you prevent or lower drug use, and we have evidence of this being successful in other countries who have implemented these plans. One failure of the war on drugs in the U.S. was when the U.S. tried to stop overprescribing OxyContin. Now, obviously, that's a good idea. You shouldn't be overprescribing OxyContin, clearly, right? Because it's an easily abused drug. That's common sense, and that's the correct move. But when they stopped overprescribing it, people like me turned to heroin use. When it was no longer available, we went to another source. The solution to this problem is creating a safe environment where people can use the drugs and maybe even supplying the drugs to them if they meet certain criteria, like if they've been an addict for this amount of time and things like that. You don't want just anybody walking in off the street and taking drugs. But if you supplied the drugs or made them available safely in a safe, clean environment, it would take the wind right out of the sails of the suppliers and they would just go away. Now, you're going to have addicts that continue to come to these exchanges, kind of like a needle exchange, and continue to use the drugs. But you're not going to have new users coming in to use the drugs. Or you can set up blocks to prevent that from happening, for example. Another aspect to this is the prevention and education aspect. Now, you'd think that going into elementary and middle and high schools and talking about how bad drug use is and all that stuff, you would think that that works, right? That's the education arm of this plan. But interestingly enough, Nancy Reagan's DARE program, where they went into schools and showed them pictures of meth addicts and stuff like that, that didn't work. It actually increased drug use. It increased drug use. So we need to take a hard look at the psychology and base this in science, because some first lady walking in and thinking she knows what she's doing is going to end in disaster. We need to look at the psychology and talk to the scientists about the most productive way to educate kids on drug use so that it doesn't raise the chances of them using drugs like the DARE program did. Those are my ideas. Those are some of my ideas on how we replace the war on drugs with something that actually eliminates drug use, or at least lowers it. Like I said, we can look at other countries and figure out what's worked for them. And historically, decriminalizing drug use and creating exchanges and safe places for addicts to use those drugs, that tends to lower drug use dramatically. And also, make weed legal. Why are we doing this? This is absurd. It is a goddamn shame to know that there are people in prison right now who've been in there for decades, literal decades of their lives, gone for possession of marijuana. That's fucking insane.